Hello, today is September 8th, 2020. This is the standard SIG cluster lifecycle call. We have fairly low attendance today, so we might keep it short. There's a couple of items in the agenda. The first one is actually from Craig Peters, but he doesn't appear to be here. Does anyone have context to this question?
I do. In the Slack channel for work group LTS, there was a discussion like what is the general opinion about blue-green cluster upgrades, and a few people dropped a comment, and I guess Craig said that this should be brought to the sequester lifecycle meeting for an opinion. I did not object. So
I think the problem here is that it's totally up to the people managing the environment about what their tolerance for risk is. And we don't really have formal opinions. We might have like practices that people could adopt, maybe a documentation about like best practices that we've seen, but I don't expect us to have formalized opinions because the way people use it, our tooling in the wild is so varied that I think it would be wrong for us to, try to have opinions versus sort of like guidelines, I guess is probably a better term. What do you think, Lubomir or Justin? Or anyone for that matter?
I think one of the things we can maybe say is because of volumes and storage, we can't say you must do blue-green, right? We have to more. In place is a valid Kubernetes upgrade strategy, and for some people it is the only realistic Kubernetes upgrade strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess what the ask here is to potentially have this as a support path. Like how can you migrate storage? How can you migrate API objects that are no longer supported in the new version? The green cluster. Sorry, which one was the original cluster? Which one is the future cluster? Blue, green.
It's a bit of a misnomer. It's just that's with apps you flip flop between them, is my understanding. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think it matters.
Yeah, the discussion I think was around who can develop this migration tooling to perform the migration. It's a big ask. SIG storage has to be involved. SIG API machinery has to be involved. And yeah.
Yeah, this is beyond the scope of cluster lifecycle. This is going to, in fact, hit everything. This kind of hits multi-clustering, right? So, and multi-clustering is, we're a horizontal SIG, but I think that this particular ask kind of hits multi-clustering. But at the same time, like, there's this weird space of asks that kind of occur that will touch everything. And I don't necessarily know that we should, I don't know, we have enough problems. Just trying to like, we haven't even cleaned up our own messes from the early years that I don't really want to like tread near a black hole and get sucked into it. When like, I think multi-clustering is a highly opinionated space where I don't think the system has been built from inception to be able to handle this in a very clean, cohesive manner.
But there is actually I actually don't know whether it's a SIG or a working group or what it is, but there is a group making progress on multi-clustering, at least for networking right now. So that is a place we can refer our friends to.
Personally, this is not really putting pressure on this our sake, but in the future I see increased demand for this. How are we going to handle it? I'm not sure. Maybe with a doc, maybe with a guideline, like Tim is saying.
I think from a deployment perspective, which we will have ideas around or should have opinions around, I think a guidelines doc is a reasonable expectation because people are looking for advice on practices. And I think they can use our tooling to help deploy those practices. But I think there's a whole slew of tooling required to make some of those practices for real. And we'll have to basically punt once it gets to that point.
Yeah. Also, I think the main secret motivation behind supporting something like that is to be able to skip Kubernetes versions. So you create a new cluster, you dump the old cluster to disk somehow, you migrate everything, and then you deploy it to this new cluster. You can skip potentially minor versions this way, but this is only theoretical, of course.
Yeah, it's all theoretical based upon object versioning, right? Like, because, if the object versions are stable in V1 types, then the answer is maybe. But if the object versions are not stable, there's no guarantee that you can have the capability of being able to do this. So, but again, I think that this is the wrong venue to do this type of conversation because it touches so many other areas. That's my opinion, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like to the extent we should make the in-place upgrade case work well for the supported scenario, which is like going through every minor version one at a time. And the other stuff I think is not uninteresting, but not our remit and touches on things that have nothing to do with things that we are building.
Yeah, agreed. I'm actually, ironically enough, having a conversation with Craig later on today. So maybe I'll follow up with him offline and see if there's other questions he had regarding this. And if there are specific items that he'd like to see, then I can see if we can follow up with him afterwards.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tim.
I think you got the next things, Lumir.
Yeah, this is a reminder that the deadline for submissions for the maintainer track of KubeCon NA 2020 is the 13th of September. That's, I guess, Monday is the deadline, next Monday. So we have again one SIG intro and three sub-project talks. I'm not sure if we are going to be able to decide which sub-project talks to include here, or we should do it offline. But does anybody have any opinions?
Well, it's coming up pretty soon, and we're not going to meet again before the 13th. Usually we should talk about this, but I don't think we have enough people in this conversation to actually make a meaningful decision. Usually one of the things we wanted to do with the sub-projects was to split them across the venues. So that way we didn't monopolize, the KubeCons with one sub-project. I think one of my problems I'm facing here is generally I'm not supportive of this virtual conference thing. I have strong opinions that it's awkward.
I can perhaps phrase that a different way. I think Lumir and I did the intro talk for EU, and I think these sort of talks will favor sub-projects that don't want a sort of two-way conversation with their users. So if there are sub-projects that want to essentially do a sort of State of the Union address, some sort of like, here is where we are, some sort of introduction, if that can get benefit from that, that's who I feel like would be a good match for that. Honestly, it's not really like the value I get out of COPs. Like, I don't feel like that's any of the projects I'm really involved in. But if there are ones like that that could actually use that time well, or do a compelling, like maybe Cluster API could do a really cool demo, right? And that might actually work really well. But I feel like I agree that there is some missing thing for the sort of two-way interaction.
I'd be interested to know like how folks felt or what folks felt the value was out of the KubeCon EU talks. Did they think it was good, it was bad, it was indifferent? I think that that might be helpful information to help guide the conversation.
You mean like attendees, right?
Well, attendees and speakers. So like, were you able to actually talk? I mean, the biggest thing of KubeCon is being able to talk with people, right? Or to have a dialogue. And if it's just you talking into a video and pre-recording it without any feedback and Q&A, we could just record videos and just be done with it. But if there is Q&A or follow-up that occurred, I think that's the biggest value of doing these talks, to be honest.
Oh, sorry, Nadir's got his hand up. Maybe he'll save me.
Yeah, maybe I'll just give some feedback from KubeCon EU, given that me and Cecile did the Cluster API talk. We had about 8 questions, I guess, in the Q&A, and there was a few more in the Slack. But I would say the majority of the interactions around Cluster API were actually in relation to Katie Gamanji's talk in the Cluster Operations track, less so in the maintainer track. So I don't know what else to infer from that, but that's my impression.
From what I've seen in prior KubeCons and this virtual one, the volume of questions was kind of similar related to the talks that were presented. For the SIG intro, we only had one question. I saw in the KubeADM session where there were a number of questions, maybe around 10. The Cluster API meeting obviously had a good number of questions. So for me, it's pretty much the same in terms of interest. Also, apparently the number of attendees that we got from Nancy were quite similar to the live attendance people at the live event. So I think for me, the value was the same. Obviously, the bigger missing part is the hallway track was not existent in the virtual event. If you would prefer to skip submitting any talks to NA, I would be fine with that. If we submit something, my recommendation would be to focus on the alpha projects that we have, the new stuff.
Well, I mean, if there is interest in feedback, and if you are getting users and people who are interested in finding out more, that is worthwhile to be able to get it rolling. I think the standard policy we were trying to adhere to before was to make sure we rotated people around, rotated some of the sub-projects around. I think we could probably do that as part of this and maybe highlight some of the upcoming or newer efforts. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. It'd be nice to know too. I wish we had like survey results that said like where the community wanted us to give feedback on. I think that would probably help guide some of our choices. But I think in absence of that, maybe we can do that as part of North America. I don't know if they have like any sort of feedback loop from the participants. But if they do, then maybe we could try to see what people want to talk about. Obviously, should we give the intro session? And then we could probably talk about we can maybe figure out which talks we should rotate through this cycle.
Component standard is something that definitely needs help. Cluster API is a new project. People are always interested in this. Maybe add-ons, but it's also a new project, I guess.
All right. Why don't we follow up offline? We can send an email today. I can do that after this meeting, and we can figure out what we want to do.
Okay.
You want to go through the survey results?
Sure. I should share my screen, I guess. Just a second.
Right.
You have to give me host.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I will try to not focus too much on all the answers, all the responses. And some of these are quite interesting. So, like, what are your roles? Mostly developers, operations, continent, Europe, and North America. How many employees? This is like a split. We do have a lot of responses from large companies. So this, I think this was kind of misleading because technology, software is also technology. So yeah, I did not prepare this. AWS is the environment, the preferred environment, also bare metal.
This is intriguing.
Yeah. And Azure and GCP after that.
So, I mean, like a lot of times, the bare metal aspect here is very intriguing.
Yeah, there is also a follow-up question that shows that everybody's using different providers for bare metal.
Okay.
How many clusters do you have in production? Mostly below 10. Average number of nodes. This should have been the maximum number of nodes to be able to estimate if people have large-scale clusters in production. It's mostly below 10. You have 2050, also 10 to 20. High availability, this is in contrast to the previous survey that we had for kubeadm. High availability was not really that popular yet, a couple of years ago. And now we have mostly all of the responses are using HA. Air gap environment, it's around 20%. Yes, no is the majority. The conformance suite, people, 22% are saying yes, mostly no. They have plans to do that. So maybe in a follow-up survey, we're going to see more people doing that. This is probably the most interesting question is what is the oldest version of Kubernetes that you have? So this was done before the release of 1.19, like exactly before the release. So it doesn't include it, but I guess it might have taken some people away from the 1.18 Pi slice and have more people in 1.19. But this is obviously a split. The concerned areas is obviously people outside of the SKU. So at the time of the survey, 115 was already out of SKU, 114, 113. So this is a, or older, I guess. This is a problem problem side.
Yeah, what's the total percentage there for the out of date?
8 plus 4, 12. That's 20, around, it's like 40% approximately. That's
That's pretty large. Like I think, and that's kind of disconcerting from a security and vulnerability perspective. That like that many people are out of date.
It definitely supports the LTS going to 4 argument, right? Like going.
Well, one of the questions I was posing to the release team is that not just LTS to 4, but pushing out the number of releases to be 3 a year to give more absorption and have a longer lead time. Because like 4 a year, like in my opinion, is kind of worthless because like that 4th release is always a mess. It always has been traditionally. Like we've, slammed in features. It's never been a good release. It has a bunch of issues with it. So I'm just questioning whether or not we should use some of this data to push back to justify to the release team to say that, hey, you have 40% of your users doing this, at least in this feedback survey. Like, why don't we have the serious conversation of potentially only having 3 releases a year and supporting for a longer time frame?
Yeah, contributing factors to these large numbers of people out of SKU is, for instance, the complexity around upgrades and the risks they don't want to take. So if you simplify upgrades, these numbers drop. If you don't break people on API changes, also the numbers drop. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because our tooling manages a lot of this stuff, right? It doesn't obviously manage some of the breaks that we usually uncover as part of the release process. But it does manage the actual upgrade and migration for them, both in cluster or both in place and with the immutable fashion. So I'm curious, like we should really ask for the people who are out of date, like what is your largest concern and maybe what tooling are you using?
I think some of the responses later, direct responses in the survey indicate API as breaking API changes as the major factor around this, because when you when you upgrade the cluster to a new version, mutable or immutable upgrades, that's fine, but you still have developers and applications that try to deploy on the new version of the cluster, and all of that is broken. They have to go and change the APIs, but there's no tooling around that. Only the API server can do it.
Yeah, let's take this particular item to like SIG release and also talk with Jordan, because like, Jordan's effort to like mature the APIs and prune the API surface area. I think that this helps to justify that conversation to be more aggressive.
So the working group LTS, I think, is being disbanded at this point, but I'm hoping that we can have at least one more meeting. We can have this discussion there.
Sounds good. This is intriguing data, by the way. It's very interesting.
Yes. How often do you upgrade? We have 18% saying that they upgrade every patch release. Every release is the highest numbers here with 32%. Every 2 releases, we also have some people that never upgrade, which is of course a use case. Or every year and less often is 9 people responded to that. So I'm happy with this chart, but I'm not really happy with this one. So this is showing us that people are within SKU. Like the majority, obviously. But there's still a lot of people that don't upgrade or don't plan to upgrade ever.
This might be like the difference between like how often do you floss your teeth and when was the last time you flossed your teeth. Like it's a desire versus actual behavior question.
I love that. We should really talk about this like during the intro talks. Like this data and presenting this data would be really interesting to talk about the motivations of why we do these things, and why it matters.
Yeah, so also, if we have this in the slides, maybe somebody's going to ask a question about it later and we can get feedback, direct feedback from them. I think the Kubernetes project in general is lacking this direct feedback. Like the only instance of somebody discussing how they do large production upgrades in a a public discussion was when work group LTS invited somebody from a European company that sells shoes and clothes, and they explained in detail how they manage upgrades and what are the problems they have. I think we have this disconnect between consumers of Kubernetes and the developers. And I'm not sure whose fault is that.
Well, it's kind of like you have a toolsmith and then you have a tool, and we don't have instructions for all the details of the tool. So it's like, I can use my wrench as a hammer, but is that a good idea? The answer is probably no. I think that those guidelines that we talked about earlier, I think would be really helpful to talk about, like, here's the different types of deployment scenarios. Here's the different patterns we've seen that are successful. Here's what you don't want to do. I think it's incumbent upon us to like really document some of this stuff to, as like a user guide, like, hey, if you don't upgrade your cluster, here's what can happen. And really outline some of the user stories and the user journeys and what they mean.
I would like to, I'm sorry, I'm just like participating fly on the wall here. This is my first street to join in, but I would say to Lumir's comment, I found Henning Jacobs because I attended several of the talks that Zalando presented about, like, here's how we do cluster lifecycle management. And I went down the path of like what they do for cluster lifecycle management, and they have their own Go application that they've written that does their own process. And that's how I ended up here, because that is neat for them, but man, there's no documentation, no good support, and no clear roadmap, and no way to openly contribute to that, right? So like this story of like, how do you do this in large enterprises and how do you do this cleanly is severely lacking. And that's what drove me here, because this is the only place I see that happening. And, it needs to be better brought up.
Yeah, I think the problem is that every one of our tools are composable and can be used by higher order systems. And people use those tools to build up their production systems. I think what we're lacking is sort of like, here's well beaten paths that we've seen in the community over time, and here's some of the talks that you can see, and here's some of the horror stories. And we recommend you do these things, and we generally don't recommend you do these other things. And we've never really taken that stance in documentation because it was always fractal. But I think that we need to, I think what this conversation today is pointing me at is we really need to do that. Just like 2 years ago, we knew HA, we had to get HA everywhere, and particularly opinionated versions of HA everywhere. So we got that done. And I think this survey is pointing out to like, people are using the knife wrench and stabbing themselves. So let's give them guidelines for how to use the knife or the wrench.
And it's also a multi-sig effort. We have to document it with different SIGs participating in this. For instance, it's not sequence lifecycle that maintains the upgrade policy of Kubernetes. It's SIG architecture that does it, because it's cross-cutting across multiple components. So we have to basically gather the different SIGs and design this guide for best practices. So this is the direct question, like what problems people faced. We have some responses here. Like for critical patches, each version. I think this is the most accurate answer that people basically should do this. The reasoning behind it is security fixes and making sure that you don't fall outside of the SKU. I think this is the best argument for an upgrade. What challenges have you faced? Like I mentioned, we see a number of mentions about API problems. API may break CNI. API deprecations again. API deprecations. API version removal. This is the theme around upgrade problems. So this is a question around how many times people would like Kubernetes to release, and I was surprised that not so many responded with either yes or no. A lot of people are not sure what this implies. Well, it also implies a higher support window, because if you release less often, you create a basically once this particular release is over, you can then enable the support for this release to be 1 year. But if the release is 1 month more, this means that you have 11 months.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, 13 months.
This is all about language. I think that if they don't understand what the implication is, I think if you were to ask most people, like, would you prefer a 9-month support window or a 1 year support window? The answer would probably be overwhelmingly 1 year instead of 9 months. So I think it's just, they don't understand the context of the question. So I think that's what the not sure is about. A lot of people don't understand what the upstream support policy is.
Yeah, but also the 1 year support window change already happened. So we are assuming that people already know about it.
Well, that's not in perpetuity. If you read the doc, that's only for the 119 release. So in order for us to view this, I talked with Stephen about this. I'm like, I'd much prefer us to have like a uniform policy for all of Kubernetes to be consistent, and to make sure that when we release artifacts, we release them more stably and do less releases every year. But that policy is not, it's only for 119, right? It's not necessarily for the rest of Kubernetes and forevers.
Yeah, personally, I would prefer if this change actually happens one day, because for the same argument that you brought, that the 4th release is always a bit rushed, and during the holidays, it's really not like a normal release, it feels. Also, I'm going to discuss this with working group LTS, see what they think about it. This is the operating system question. Operating system / distro, Ubuntu is winning with 62%. These are pretty much the same numbers we got a couple of years ago. We have some Windows users. I'm not going to go through the rest of the distros, but this is pretty much the same as before. Are you interested in running mixed architectures? People saying maybe in the future. They're not sure if they are going to need the new architecture for their workloads, but still a possibility. This is the CRI, the container runtime question. Docker is currently at 56%. Compared to the KubeADM survey, this has dropped with 4% only. but Containerd has increased its presence. Before that, we had Cryo Containerd pretty much having the same 15%, and the rest was sparse. But I guess Containerd is gathering more users from the Cryo side. This is something I'm going to show to SIG-Node, because if we are going to hard remove Docker shim, this is going to be a pretty bad idea. So it has to be in support for a while longer, even if this is community support.
Agreed.
This is the CNI question. We have Calico. This is a very large increase for Calico. I believe in the last survey, we had Weave, Flannel, Calico, and Cilium having pretty much the same numbers. But now we have Calico having almost 40%. And we have a almost even split between Flannel and Cilium.
I would like us to like the support capabilities for, I mean, we removed Flannel from our documentation because like the window of support for Flannel and their update plans was just lagging because they have people that are kind of maintaining the project and doing releases, but it's not like under active development. So I wonder, have we removed all references and documentation to Flannel, or is there still some lingering pieces there?
So because of political reasons, we had to remove the CNI examples from the KubeADM page completely. Nowadays, we just link to the whole list of CNI. From there, you can pick the CNI that you want. KubeADM no longer prefers Flannel as one of its CNI plugins. I agree, it's not well maintained, unfortunately, but it has historic impact because people just continue to use it.
Okay, well, so long as we don't have documentation on our side that calls it out, and maybe we should put this in the guidelines too, like, make sure that you have well-supported CNIs that are actively maintained and keep up to date and actually are tested as part of upstream. Right?
That is a very good reason, yeah. I think we should include that because one of the responses was that they face CNI problems during upgrades.
All right, I'll add that to my, I have a list of things that we should put in the guidelines.
This question was about how do you consume Kubernetes. The winner is upstream packages, which indicates to us and SIG release that we should continue maintaining these packages and binaries. We didn't distinguish between these two, but it's not clear what they prefer, the packages or the binaries. Maybe we should have split the question here. We have still some folks that are building internally, maybe applying patches to Kubernetes. This is a very puzzling bare metal question that we had. I honestly, I only know two of these. Like, I really don't know all of these bare metal providers, but so the winner here is not using bare metal, and the rest is like a 1% split across different providers. I think this question is not formulated very well. How do we prepare your operating system? For Kubernetes, the winner here is we use operating system images supplied by the distribution, which basically means that you may be taking a vanilla Ubuntu to install Kubernetes on it. This has a risk because in the past, Ubuntu did break Kubernetes completely with systemd resolve changes. The second place here we have we built our own operating system images. No, you can base your Kubernetes ready distro based on an existing distro. So not surprising that this is the second piece of the chart, the second highest piece of the chart. If you're building your own operating system images,
I think like right back there is also a best practices, right? Like we just taking, we have an image builder sub project. It's getting used pretty widely. Like we should implement or talk about why it's a best practice for immutability and just for management of it and what that means. I'm going to take note there too as well. This survey is fascinating to me right now. It's good. Not fascinating as in like new, just like it's making every time we go through this process, it's like illuminates like we knew these things exist, but having it smack you in the face is also good.
yeah, otherwise we only have speculations. This includes some direct responses around what people do for preparing OS images. Somebody says too many to list. They use the image builder. Applying hardening. This is, I guess, a viable use case as well. Hardening as well, again. Do you use auto-scaling groups to manage your Kubernetes nodes? The majority says yes. Also maybe in the future. So this seems to be something that we are going to see more of. And potentially the whole chart can be, we do use auto-scaling groups.
Sorry, just on that one gotcha with COPS is even if you're not auto-scaling, we run in an auto-scaling, AWS auto-scaling group for resiliency, i.e. to relaunch. So some wiggle room in that question, I guess.
And does that question apply to AWS only, or is it like general in the sense, whatever that provider supports?
Oh, it's a general question.
Okay.
If your environment supported, do you use ephemeral machine types like AWS Spot? I'm not exactly an expert in this area, but we have like people saying yes, also maybe in the future. What factors have influenced your decision-making to which machine types you have used for your cluster? Cost, obviously, a very important reason. And cost, machine capacity requirements. We are a hardware manufacturer, interesting. Yeah, so it's mostly cost and performance, workload requirements. So this is the Kubernetes part. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. Tim, do you want me to go to Kubernetes and cluster API after that, or should we leave this to the sub-projects?
I say keep going. I don't know about everybody else, but so far I've been pretty intrigued with this information. So I'm all for keep going.
And would love, is there a way this survey results can be shared somewhere that I can access offline?
The survey results are in the agenda document. You can click on the link. You should be able to see the pie chart and responses.
Thanks.
So this is the question about how is your overall Kubernetes experience. We have a peak around 8 out of 10, which is pretty good news for the Kubernetes people. Do you run production clusters with Kubernetes? We have like 65% yes, maybe in the future, 20% no. This is a very detailed question. It's to pretty much explain what are the most important features to you. I'm going to leave this to the Kubernetes maintainers because it's very specific. This is also very specific. How do you rate different areas of using Kubernetes? Do you treat your Kubernetes nodes as immutable? For example, delete old nodes and join new ones? I was surprised that we have 40% of the users that do that. It's really interesting because kubeadm really does not support this, or in terms of documentation, we don't support it. So maybe we should, this is an indication for me that we should write docs for it. How can you perform immutable upgrades using kubeadm?
It's pretty much cluster API, right? Like,
Yes, maybe we have also users outside of Cluster API, potentially. This is a question about the kubeadm operator. This is cluster management with a declarative approach. People are interested about it. This is what do you expect from the kubeadm operator? The highest ranking answer here is extensibility. Get low-level controls and customization around operations. What types of changes do you want the operator to support? I think the highest response here was CA rotation, I guess.
Sorry, aren't you reading those backwards?
Well, if you, so you can rate, these are four options, and you can rate them, which one is the highest important for you. So
which is I'm supposed to rank that number 1, which is the blue bar. So the one with the biggest blue bar is.
Sorry. Yes. So it's this one. It's reconfigure control plane components, such as the Kube API server. I guess this was also the same here. High-level abstractions. Okay. This is not a surprise for the kubeadm maintainers. Users wanted this for a very long time. It's a complicated use case. Most desired kubeadm feature. We can leave this to the kubeadm maintainers. We don't have a team here in the feature request section. Biggest challenge. I think we are maybe failing around the configuration documentation. In fact, I have a issue walked in the community's website for that. How to find the docs for the kubeadm config file. This is a Cluster API feedback. We have 7 out of 10 as the peak for the user experience. How did you hear about Cluster API? The winner here is from a blog post. The second place is from a colleague. Are you running Cluster API production? 27% are saying yes. No are 27 again. And maybe in the future is the majority. How do you install and manage Cluster API? So funny thing, I was observing how this pie chart evolves, and it was like a split all the time until more people joined with responses, and it got to a point where Cluster kernel was winning with majority. But it was like most of the time, it was basically an even split between different options. Okay. Also, we seem to have people using their own way to do it, even Git pull. Do you use kubeadm control plane to manage your control plane? The majority is saying no, but I would like to. Yes, 27%. What Cluster API infrastructure provider are you using? The winner with 4 responses is AWS. vSphere is second place, a split between Azure, GCP, and Metal 3. What Cluster API bootstrap provider are you using? kubeadm is the first place. Taos third place. Second place with 3 responses. This is a question about specific API resources of Cluster API machine sets or machine deployments. machine deployments is the winner here. Also, a pretty high percentage people are not sure. How many workload clusters do you have for a management cluster? The winner here is between 1 and 5. Okay. What are your favorite cluster API features? Pivoting, AKS integration, declarative cluster management. These are responses that the cluster API folks definitely should look at. Your most desired most desired cluster API feature. Multi-tenancy, sorry. Advanced features around rolling out changes. The biggest challenges around using cluster API. Have some responses here. The complexity, some general questions about the readiness outside of alpha. So this is for HCD, the section about HCD ADM. I think we pretty much near the end at this point. How do you manage HCD? I think the response here is does HCD as a service co-locate from the HCD cluster? Where would you prefer to run HCD? The winner is on the same machines as the Kube API server, which is the Kube ADM calls this stacked HCD topology. Dario, you have a question?
Yeah, on the previous question, I think it was asking where would you prefer to manage HCD, and I think that response, right, that's aspirational, except in the case of COPS, which uses HCD Manager. Justin, would you agree that that's what that case corresponds to? Like,
Yes. I don't entirely know what they mean by a management service co-located on the HCD cluster. I guess. I don't know. I guess that means something like HCD Manager or HCD ADM. So I guess that's good news, right, for the HCD ADM project.
yeah.
All right. How would you prefer to run HCD? The majority responded as a static pod managed by the kubelet. Second place and third place, second place is with a service manager like systemd, and a pretty high percentage don't think it matters. If your HCD cluster fails, what would you do? 78% almost responded that they would like to recover the HCD cluster instead of tearing it down. The most challenging aspect around HCD management is this is have 13 responses here. Have response about certs, secrets, recovery from backup. There's a comment about COPS choosing to use HCD Manager. This is a criticism, I guess. Do you have any other comments for us? Basically, people are saying keep up the good work. A lot of COPS users in the survey, I think somebody responded that they would, yes, they wanted feedback from COPS. So maybe we should have had a COPS section in the survey itself. So yeah, that's it. We are definitely going to draw some conclusions out of this. My action item is to talk to SIG release pretty much. And also present the survey at the Kube ADM office hours. You should definitely, the cluster API should definitely discuss it as well. And the other sub-projects, if you're interested, just talk about the survey.
Yeah, let's make sure that, Lubomir, you might want to go to some of those other meetings to just present the results and then have them maybe follow up afterwards, or maybe talk with them offline so that they can present the results to the sub-project.
Yeah, already sent a mail to the mailing list. If folks want to talk about it, they should. I'm not sure I can join the Cluster API meeting tomorrow, but I can message the Slack channel. All right. We are out of time. I guess we shouldn't do the subproject updates today.
I thought this was totally worth our time, though. I'm definitely gonna like pour over those results. And I have one key takeaway is that we really need to like outline guidelines in this next cycle, and try to like during the next KubeCon EU maybe even highlight some of these guidelines or best practices, and try to drop links and handy information for how people can use the tooling and use these best practices over time.
Yes, agreed.
Question on the survey. Where was this survey sent out, and like from when are the results from?
We prepared the survey. So the survey preparation started a long time ago. With the COVID delays, we waited for KubeCon to start, and basically we sent the survey live with the start of KubeCon. We collected results until today. The link for the survey was available in KubeCon slides, as well as messages to the Kubernetes mailing lists and Slack channels, and also Twitter, I guess. It was advertised in a lot of places.
Sounds good, yeah. And one more thing, like, is there a way we can include in this survey a question around if people wanted to use Cluster API to managed offerings like EKS, AKS, and GKE?
Well, the survey is over.
Right, for the next one, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, this is a fascinating question. I wonder how people are going to respond, but I really don't want to include any mentions about products, but it can be generalized as, hey, do you want to manage these solutions? You can also have your own survey. You can just create a survey, send it to the sequence lifecycle mailing list, and see how people respond.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think SIG cluster lifecycle is doing a lot of great work in this area. So I thought including that question would help. I see what are your favorite cluster API feature has one of the responses as EKS integration. So I think it would be good to know from the community if they want you guys to support that or not. I would be, at least I am from Salesforce side, I'm looking forward to having that support. So I wanted to know if like people in the community are also in the same boat as us, or they don't care, kind of thing.
You can definitely create even a survey with one question and announce it to the mailing list. Also join the Cluster API meeting, announce it there as well, and see how many people respond.
Sounds good.
I want to call it. We're at time, folks, so we should call it. And I'm sure everyone's got a hard stop or other things to do. So thanks, everyone. I'll post the recording and put it in the notes.